Hey guys, how's it going? Welcome to Going Dotty. I'm Trace Egan, and in today's video we're going to be looking at the construct of consciousness and giving some shape to its form. So let's just get into it. We've spoken in an earlier video about within the mental body system and within the mental body energy grid, this concept of a fractured consciousness. So we just want to break that down a little bit and look into actual consciousness, see what it is, how it operates, how the fragmented consciousness comes about, and to just try and understand some of the other relevant elements of consciousness so that we can get a full and clear picture on what we're dealing with when we talk about consciousness. So as an initial frame of reference for consciousness, one of the best definitions that I have ever come across for the concept of consciousness is actually found in the definition of the word shame. So shame is defined as a painful feeling of humiliation or distress caused by the consciousness of wrong or foolish behaviour. And within that concept, I think that's where we can find what consciousness really is. You know, consciousness is not the feeling, nor is it the behavioural pattern that occurred. Consciousness as being the consciousness that facilitated such kind of behaviour. So we've spoken a little bit about the fractured state of consciousness that exists in society, on the planet at the moment, and the effect of that is that a fractured state of consciousness or a disempowered state of self creates many aspects of an individual. It creates a fractured system. It creates threads to the self, as opposed to this more cohesive and therefore more manageable element of an individual. That consciousness is the masculine element of ourselves. It is the masculine component to our structure and being. If you break down the spirit, if you break down the self or an individual, we can talk about the binary nature of our form. You have the yin and the yang, or we have the masculine and the feminine elements of self. And to my mind, when it comes to energetics, the masculine element of self in a spiritual manner is what our consciousness would be. Our consciousness is like the structure that we live within. It is the invisible walls of our belief systems, of our thoughts and our constructs. And the masculine element is that which gives the form or the mould that our feminine element of ourself can then move through and navigate as. And this is how the masculine and the feminine work together in a unity and in a oneness within the being, because we have the masculine structure and then we have the feminine flow that moves through the moulds that the masculine structure creates. So when we apply this to the conceptual self, when we apply this to the mind or the brain or the thinking system that we have, we can see that our thoughts and our beliefs, our perspectives, our concepts, and what we understand to exist is the conscious structure within which we live. And that all of the frames of reference, all the points of view that we have, all the angles and perspectives are all these little angulations of consciousness that we exist within. Our consciousness is our own, and we often experience a shared space and state of consciousness with other people. And yet at the same time, it's important to realise that our conscious being, our conscious structure is an individual unit. And when we become sovereign within that individual unit, when we become solid within the being that we are, then we are potentially, best placed to be able to enact within the world and to carry out and conduct ourselves in the way that we would choose to. When we're looking at our consciousness and our conscious structure, it's very important to have an understanding of where we're at, where we're coming from, and how we got to be where we were. We are moulded within our life and in our world from childhood and early life into our preteen years, and then our adolescence, and then we're a young adult, and then we're out in the world, as sovereign, independent beings doing our own thing. And at every stage along that journey, every interaction that we have, everything that we, come up against, everything that we experience, and the younger we are, the more relevant this is. These are all these primary influences that mould the landscape of our mind. It's what shows us the world as the only world that we ever get to experience. Every individual's perspective is slightly different because everybody has a very different experience of primary influences. All of this early life development is very important because as a sculptor carves his block of marble, these are the first chisel points. These are the first major chunks that are taken out of that block of marble. And over time, as we learn to be social creatures and engage with others, we learn subtly, socially, how to interact with them. And this is one of the reasons why so much therapy goes back to this concept of childhood trauma or, first initial memories and moments, because a lot of the things that we carry within us for the duration of life can be found and instigated into these, very basic and primary experiences that we first have. We all have trauma. I once heard trauma defined as anything that occurs that is counter or contrary to what was expected. So when you consider a young child, and again, I really am focusing on the early life stages because this is where our conscious development comes from. These are these initial imprints. And if you're supported in your early life and these initial imprints that you get, then you get a really solid structure, and any traumas that occur after that are easier to deal with. Whereas if you don't get a kind of supporting structure in your early life, then you can never really cap an experience or put a cap on yourself to be able to deal with the next experience. So the issues build on top of each other. And because consciousness creates our beliefs, our thoughts, our experiences, because it creates our beliefs, if you have a traumatic event happen and that creates a belief system in your mind, and then your conscious, one of the jobs of your consciousness is to reinforce itself. So you'll go out into the world and you will be drawn to experiences that reinforce the reality of that belief that you carry because of something that occurred. And this happens at all stages in life, but it is easier, it is most likely to happen and to occur into a young person, or the younger the person is, the more vulnerable they are to this experience, which is really bad news for us at the moment, because we really don't seem to be valuing our children very highly in society at this time. We're not really putting the structures in to give them best placement in this world. And there's an awful lot of stuff on in the world that is counter to the development of consciousness of the children of our time, and therefore the generations to come. And another element about the growth, the development of consciousness within an individual is that a reality is that we all experience trauma to some extent or other. It's not a battlefield of how traumatized you are, how bad your trauma is. Trauma is trauma. Trauma is something difficult to deal with. It likely will affect other elements of ourself and our inner world if we don't have the tools to be able to deal with it. Trauma is something that we become more accustomed to processing appropriately the older we get. The more experience you have, the more experienced you are to be able to deal with things. You filter things differently when they've happened to you before, or if you have a lot of experience, then you are able to filter again, process information. You're able to break it down, you're able to make it relevant to yourself, and you're able to file it away. But when we're younger, we're more vulnerable. And when we're vulnerable, we have no filtering, we have no processing, we don't know how to process. And I suppose that's why the psychological narrative often comes back to early life and childhood. And that really leads on to my last and final point, which is that consciousness inherently seeks structure. This might sound a little bit daft, but I think it's very relevant and true that if the spirit of an individual, if the self and the inner being of somebody is seeking to understand itself and is seeking, the symbology of self and the world around it, consciousness will find that wherever consciousness finds itself to be. I think it is very plausible that an individual would learn a lot of high-level spiritual truths about life and the world and observations from things such as literature. And when I say literature, I mean Harry Potter, I mean The Lord of the Rings, I mean Game of Thrones. You know, we have these epic, sweeping sagas that cover these large conceptual pieces, and consciousness will work with what it has available to it. Consciousness will find a structure. It will find symbology wherever it finds itself. That's it for today. I hope you've enjoyed it. I hope it's been useful and a little bit relevant. And I hope you'll join me again. So I'll speak to you soon. Thanks so much.